Okay, so you know this is Wireframes with Drupal in mind, and my name is Cindy McCourt. This is a little bit about me. I am a Drupal planner and builder. I'm not a coder. I'm an instructional designer and a trainer, so I do Drupal training as well. I'm a project manager and a business process analyst. I get in with the client and understand what they need. Requirements analyst. It's called so many different things. This is my book, and like I said earlier, I'll be giving a couple of these away on behalf of my very generous publisher, Wiley. And this is a Rocks book, so I thank Wiley for making this available to us. And today's focus, is promised in the advertisement, we're going to be looking at how themes manage your page layouts, creating different layouts with one theme, options for overriding, and strategies for block positioning. My assumptions today are that you are relatively new to Drupal, so that if you know all this stuff, you might get bored. You need to plan Drupal layout pages, and you need pages to be easy to build and maintain. No custom coding. You're going to hand it over to someone who's not a coder, and they want to be able to say, I want to move this block around anytime I want. Okay, well, there's certain restrictions. There's certain things you can and cannot do if you want them to have that flexibility. And you need the page layout to remain relatively consistent as content changes. So those are going to be the things we focus on today. Assumptions is what you need. So in order to discuss this, we need to think in wireframes and Drupal themes. These are some sample wireframes, very simple wireframes created in Illustrator. And when you take the wireframe, you add your PSD, your Photoshop comp, all the pretty picture part of it, to it. It gets converted into a theme. The person who is called a themer converts it, and the person who's referred to as a builder or a developer will then use that theme and assemble the pages that are being dictated by the wireframe. Okay, does that make sense? All right, so let's just real quick, in case you're really, really new and you don't know what a theme is, from a technical perspective, it's just a bundle of code that enables Drupal to display what you want to display. That's the simpleness of it. There's a lot to know about themes, and we're not going to get into all that detail because I'm assuming that you are here to understand what you need to know as a designer to communicate with the builders. You don't need to know how the builder gets it done, how the themer codes in order to be a designer. You just need to know what they're going to do with your designs, and you want to make their life happy so they can make you happy with the design and the finished product. So what we need to know as designers is just a little bit about the theme structure. So it's theme structure 101. What you have here is the theme structure from 0 Point. It's one of my favorite themes. It's very simple but flexible. It looks like a wireframe the way I've drawn it, doesn't it? But what you're looking at here is a series of the little red boxes, is a series of boxes or containers where you stick blocks of content. Okay, so when you're building your blocks, you install a module gets installed, and let's say it's the weather module. The weather module produces a block for you. It's a block with some weather information in it. So you say, I want that block to show up here on the page. So you assign it a region and you give it, and it shows up where you want it to show up, given conditions. So your builder is going to say, under what conditions does this need to show up? And your builder or developer is probably going to be the one who influences the conditions. So for example, if the path is X, then show this block in this region. If this menu item was selected, show this block in this region. There's lots of options available to the developer. And as the designer, you and the planner of these layouts, you may have an opinion of what conditions should be met. You might want to work with them closely on that, but that's typically how it works. So from the development side, that's pretty much all you really need to know from a technical perspective. That's what they're going to be doing with your work, and that's how you can work together. So with that one theme that we had up there, you can have all sorts. Don't laugh at my wireframes; they're very simple. You can have all sorts of layouts. Every one of these layouts, whether they're good or not, can be created with that one theme. So what happens here, for example, if you put a block in a region, if you say, I want to drop this into one of the regions, it shows up. If nothing's in that region, it collapses. But there's certain, we're going to go into block placement to talk about regions collapsing and not collapsing a little bit later. But let's talk a little bit about how this works, if it's not obvious to some. So for example, in this particular theme, the region on the top left is it's got a block in it, and the block is as big as you can see there, maybe as a picture, okay? And you notice how it's wider than the actual dotted line. In this particular theme, the CSS says, stretch to fit, float out to the right, stretch to fit whatever you stick in here. So because I know that, and I'm the builder, and my designer handed it to me, I said, oh, well, she's got 2 other smaller blocks they want to stick in there. I'm going to stick the second one here in the 3rd slot, and the 3rd one in the 4th slot, so that the first one can expand across that space where the second one was, and the 3rd and the 4th can go into those 2 can go into the other 2. Does that make sense? All right. So in a way, when you're talking about the first row, it's like, well, that's a one-to-one relationship. Why do I have to build a region and then build a block? Why can't I just put blocks in my things? Well, technically, you can actually put more than one block in these regions. What's going to happen is it's going to expand down. So, for example, if you look down along the side, the 2 sidebars here, if I could come around here, these are sidebars, all right? And take the blocks, and you stick them in the sidebar. You don't see that stacked down along the side, right? Well, if you were to take multiple blocks and stick it in here, they would push down as well. Okay? So there's a block here. So you can see here we have 2 blocks. Stick it into the region, and it's going to expand and push the main content area down. So depending on how much content you put into the regions, they're going to stretch and fit, and it's going to change the shape of your page. So understanding a little bit about how your theme works, whether you're yet to develop the theme or whether you're going to use an existing theme, understanding how it works, getting there and play with it, talk to the builder. If you're not going to be in there playing with it, say, hey, we're going to be using this theme. Can you talk to me about what are the restrictions for this theme? What can I do, can't do, or whatever. Here's another example. Notice how we have everything's shifted up on the page, and we have one big block sitting on top of the content. We have main content area, and we have 2 blocks on the side sitting in a sidebar. So none of the regions across the top are there, so everything moved up. This is, by the way, in Drupal 6, there's a mission statement. That's the mission, where the mission goes. Drupal 7 doesn't have a mission. You're supposed to create a block for your mission in Drupal 7. So does the concept make sense? Just dropping them in and things move around? Okay. Stop me anytime if you have a question, okay? So what comes first, the chicken or the egg? Wireframes or theme? In this particular example, the assumption was that the theme came first. I threw together real quick a class reunion website for our class reunion. It was quite fun, a little e-commerce in there. So picked a theme, did some rough layouts, and then built the site. So you can see we go from theme to layout to site page. But it can be the other way around. So if you have a budget for a custom theme, and you want to make sure that you're building a theme that can be used later to build all sorts of different pages and sizes. This gentleman over here is going, yeah. What you can do is you can take your wireframes, understanding that you're building your wireframes with Drupal in mind, knowing that, okay, I'm going to build all these, I want these blocks to show up in the wireframe. And I know my builder's going to have to, my themer's going to have to make some regions for that. So, I'm going to talk to him about that. So, in the past when I've done this, where they wanted to have a custom theme and they wanted to have some flexibility, we sat down with the wireframer and we talked about what general layouts they wanted to have, and we made an agreement as to where the main content area was always going to be, what regions were going to be on the top, what regions were going to be on the bottom, how they were going to be laid out. And with that worksheet, he went off and said, okay, what can I build with this? Now, it started with the theme, but he had wireframes in mind. He had a couple sample layouts, and we talked about it. So it's not a perfect linear process when you're trying to come up with a theme architecture or a theme structure so that you can build all the pages you want. But it helps to have some ideas of what your layouts are going to look like, what you want, bring them to your themer and say, what is it going to take to get this done? And have I just designed something that's going to require a theme that's more robust than we can afford?
So can you start with a wireframe and then maybe go out and look for a theme somewhere that would accommodate?
You can certainly do that, and I've done that, and it can be time-consuming and frustrating because you've spent a lot of time on your wireframes, potentially a lot of time on your wireframes, fallen in love with them, and found that the free themes that are out there aren't going to support it. Now, the theme starters, there's a lot of them, like Fusion and Zen and so on. They all come with different configurations. Some of them are much more sophisticated. Like Adaptive Theme, that's another one. They have a lot of potential regions you can enable, but you got to kind of know what you're doing with theming. And if you do, then you have that potential, and a lot of your work is done for you. Yes.
Diagram you have here makes it pretty clear, but if you're going out and looking for a theme, is there any kind of a quick way to get some practical sense of what that theme provides in terms of potential?
In Drupal's, it depends on the author of the theme. Some of them are really cool, like for example, the developer of Danland, and he has several themes out there. I can't remember his name, forgive me. He has a demo site, and it displays all the blocks. There's block 1, region 1, region 2, region 3, or whatever. So, but others don't do that. They'll just say, and 19 regions are available. So you're like, okay, I wonder where those are. So what happens is, for me, I install the theme. I go into block view, like as if I'm going to assign blocks. And in this Drupal 6, it's a lot easier. And little highlights show up as to where everything is. So you can see, oh, it's going to be a 4 across the top, or 1 on the side, or whatever. It takes some experimentation sometimes. Sometimes the pictures are good, the little screen captures that they provide. It's just a mixed game. So, and then in Drupal 7, those little highlighted areas don't always show up. I installed a couple themes, and I was in 7, and I was like, oh, where are the regions? So I had to start playing with it to figure it out, even when I said like show regions or show blocks feature. Some of them have it, like Bartlett. I think you can turn it on to see it, if memory serves me. I don't remember. So in 7, it's a little bit less convenient at times than in 6, but I assume that's probably going to improve. So, any other questions? Yes?
You mentioned Adaptive Theme. Is that one of your favorites for being flexible to use different layouts?
I know the developer. He's done some good work. We used it used him with a client. The flexibility of his starter foundation is incredible. That and Fusion, right up there. Fusion's good. Zen is popular, but Zen does not come with a lot of the advanced settings features that theme starters like Fusion and Adaptive Theme come with. And those aren't the only two. There's a lot of starters out there that are very good. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about that main content area. So far, it's just been this big blue blob on the screen. Drupal's theming structure has a file called page.tpl.php, tipple fit. Okay, I read that once. It's funny. So it has a page tipple fit, which defines the structure of the page, where all the regions are going to be, where the main content area is going to appear, and in Drupal 6, where the mission might appear, and so on. But the main content area and what goes in there is decided by other factors. If it's a node, it's going to be decided by the node.tpl.php. Same with blocks. Block layouts the block layouts most likely are defined by the tool or the module that's creating the block. If you look at the tipple code for the block, it's just going to say bring content into the block. Okay, so wherever that content came from, that PHP, that layout content, the CSS and so on, is going to be associated with that system. But let's focus right now on this main content area. And if you're an experienced person who, laying out pages, you're going to know that if you have 2 columns on the side or on either side, or 2 columns side by side or whatever, the main content area is going to be smaller. Screen real estate, this is kind of common sense, right? If you have 1, it's going to be a little bit wider. So when you're designing, and this is kind of design 101, whether you're doing just regular HTML or Drupal or anything else, knowing what's going to be appearing on either side how it influences that main content area and the kinds of things that go in there, you're going to need to decide, well, the objects that I'm going to be showing in there are going to take this much space. Am I leaving enough space? Do I need to remove some blocks to make it wide? But the way these pages that are being displayed here, these really simple wireframes, some of them can be nodes. Some of them can be nodes that have been manipulated with a module, the layout manipulated with a module. They can be views, view pages, view blocks. So depending on how that main content is being generated, the layout will be influenced by that resource. Okay, so either if it's a node, so let's talk about that for a second. So let's say this is a wireframe for a node. It's actually it's just a plain node. I think it's not a book. Okay, so the red block up here, circling the various fields, that's the information that's going to show up out of control, if you will, from the theme, a generic theme. Okay, so if we start at the top, the site name, that's going to be placed by the page. The menus page by page, title, and the various peripheral information associated with Node, like maybe author, publish date, the tags, and so on. Maybe some Node-related features such as bookmark and such. Those are all going to be created, managed by your page. The stuff in the red is managed by the Node template. Okay, Node template. Now, if that Node template is just a print content, show content. And your content, if this is a node, is going to be driven by the sequence of the fields of how they're controlled by your content type. So as a builder, that's really good to know. As an artist, you just need to know that, okay, if I need this to be laid out anything other than straight down, stacked on top of each other, I know that I'm going to have to let my developer know that, and then ask them whether or not that's going to, the way I want to do it, is going to impact the development schedule, cost, and so on. So in this particular case, the fields are stacked on top of each other. We have objectives, that's a field, lesson is a field, and then there's a big block down here, maybe it's video or an image or something. Okay? So they're stacked on top of each other. The little image that's embedded in the lesson, that was just a WYSIWYG, drop in a little HTML image tag. So I can have a varied layout. It's not perfectly stacked, so it doesn't, it's not totally up and down. But I'm using HTML. I'm not using the theme to do this. Okay? But if I have a node that has multiple fields that I want to put in two different columns, I have several options. I can either have a special node tipple fit for that particular type of content or that particular page, that particular node, I should say, or I could use various modules to change the layout. So, for example, I could use the composite layout, which is a node-by-node layout tool. And that previous page, that one was done by composite. Or I could use panels. Panels is a very powerful layout tool, and unfortunately they're presenting down the hall at the same time. It would have been good to, so you could run down there and learn more about panels. But panels is very powerful in the community, depending on who you ask. Someone's going to either really love them, or they're going to say, oh, no. So if you're going to go down the panels route, if you're going to go down composite layout, read up on it and make your own decision as to what's best for you based on your skills, your resources, your schedule, your budget, and so on. Okay? So there's a couple alternatives to overriding a theme without having to change your theme. So far we've talked about page layouts. We've talked about content area layouts, the main area where the nodes appear and views and so on. Next, let's talk a little bit about blocks. So, for example, on this particular layout, it's all blocks. Okay, this is a home page or maybe a landing page or something. You'll notice on this particular block, everything's stacked on top of each other. Nice and even, boom, 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 boom. And in this particular case, if I were the builder on this, I would go to views, and I would say, show these three fields in a list. It would be an unmarked HTML list. Now, coming over here, though, notice how the image is next to the text. That's not a default layout feature that you can enable in views, unless someone writes a wonderful widget, which we're always doing. But it's likely that in this particular case, a little customization for that view block is going to be needed, so that a layout, a little extra CSS to take one field and lay it next to another in a series of others. So depending on how your blocks are created, whether you're doing it manually, whether they're being created by a view or some other module that you've installed, the layout may or may not be easy to change. And that's something to take into consideration. So you can make really cool layouts, but if you don't have the budget to have a CSSer come in and do customization to make that happen, and you might have to change your strategy. So just something to think about. It's marrying the planning side with the building side and making sure you stay on schedule and budget. All right. Now, here's some things you can do. Let's say you have no budget. That's all part of this conversation. I don't have access to these wonderful, talented programmers who can make beautiful things happen for me. I've got to deal with what I have. So here's a couple things. First thing you want to remember is that when you're defining a block, blocks, depending on what real content actually shows in there, can change shape. So for example, in this one, in the wireframe, you may have a latest members block. And I'm going to show the first name and the last name and the organization and join month year. Isn't that pretty? You should put a wireframe out there and it fits perfectly right here on the right or the left or the top or the bottom. And you're excited about it. And then people start signing up. And they have really long names. And they have, really long organization names. And so you're like, well, I'll just cut it off. It's like, well, okay, if you cut it off to 10 characters, I'd say that's the rule, 10 characters. Well, that's not very good information. You want your information on your screen to be valuable. You want it to be understandable. So what are you going to do? What are you going to deal with long fields? What happens is, depending on where that block has been placed, it is, for example, squished between on the side or two other blocks that are side by side, depending on how much space it has available to itself, it's going to either push down, because things are going to wrap, or on the side, it's going to expand out if it has some flexibility. So, for example, if you put this block on the top of that 0 point thing, how it showed how one expanded, it might expand out to the side and actually become more wider because it had that flexibility. So, keeping that in mind, the content of the block and what can happen to it when reality hits, when real data starts dynamically being ported into those blocks because they're ever changing, because that's what we're building, right? Content management systems with dynamic content that changes and is interesting to all our visitors. That's what we're looking for, right? So keeping that in mind, let's talk a little bit about some layout strategies, some very basic rules, if you will, to consider. On this first one, the 3 blocks across the top, nice uniform look. Across the bottom, nice uniform look. We have a content area, a little bit of sidebar action next to each other. Okay, looks, although simple, nice and clean, balanced, if you will. Now let's look at the next one. Notice how the blocks that are horizontal are different heights. So depending on, and the reason why they're different heights in this particular scenario might be because one of them, the long one, extra long one, the first one there, is a list. And in your list you said show 4 items because it's a view. You went out, made a query, and says show the latest 4 articles. Well, one of the articles' titles was just a little bit longer than you thought it would be, and it wrapped and down it goes. Now it's pushing down. The next list show the latest, story, picture. The person who loaded the picture up, it was a landscape picture versus a portrait picture. So when it got readjusted to fit, it ended up being less tall. So now, instead of being more of a portrait picture, which made it taller, if you will, it's a landscape. So it's a smaller landscape one. So that one shot up in that particular case because it's showing the latest picture at it. And then the last one is maybe a fixed one where you made it by hand and it's always going to be that same size and it's perfect. So now you're up and down and you're jiggling because you have some dynamic content in there, some content that you maybe can't control, like images being imported and lists and titles changing and so on. And then the same thing happens, of course, down across the bottom. So keeping in mind that if your block is being generated by dynamically by content that can change shape, size, and so on, you're going to want to remember where you're placing it. If you were to place it across the bottom, sometimes, the height change is not as distracting to your visitors because they're scrolling down and usually it's the less important stuff that you put at the bottom. Quite often above the fold is, what's most important. So, maybe if it jiggles down there, it's not a big deal. But if it jiggles up top, it kind of loses its appeal. And quite often nowadays, if you're going to spend money making something look good, you want it to look good. You don't want it to look inconsistent. Unless that's the feel you're looking for, go for it. I'm not going to fight you on it, I'm just giving you a heads up. So remembering, saying, okay, I'm going to need a block that has a list. That shape might change constantly. Well, if it changes constantly, and I don't want my horizontal lines to jiggle, maybe I need to be on the sidebar. There are themes out there. I found one where it all blocks heights default to the longest one. So the edges around it, they look consistent, but the content is varying in there. So that might be okay. Maybe the colored background makes it look consistent, and your themer can make them balance a certain way. So varying content, width, heights, and so on, and widths can be adjusted in the theme for you. There are alternatives, but in the simple default world, the ones that are giving away for free, that's not always there. So you have to keep that in mind.
On those blocks at the top along there, would you set it, like you said before, where there's a fixed number of characters, so it would always stay the same size no matter what? Like if you were doing a list of news stories, for instance?
Let me put it to you from a usability perspective. I wouldn't recommend taking the title of something and just cropping it always at a certain fixed number of characters, because it's not very informative. It's not, you're not going to get the SEO attention that you're going to want. Who doesn't want SEO attention? So I would take that into consideration. Yes, it's always possible. You can take the field and crop it, and then it's more predictable. I don't know if I would do it though. Okay. Any other quick questions? Okay. So on the sides, what's going to happen is they're going to expand down. And depending on how many columns you're using, in this particular case we have 2 side by side, they may be narrow or wider. Some of the themes have it such that the first sidebar is maybe narrow and the second one's wider. Some of the themes allow you to actually go into the advanced settings and change that. It's very cool. 0 Point has that option. The starter themes like Adaptive Theme and Fusion, they have the power for you to predefine. You want wide, narrow, fixed, variable. So you can play around with that. If you know you have that power, you can. Now that's for the whole thing. You can't do it from like one page to page. It's for the whole thing. But if you have that flexibility, that's something to keep in mind. So let's talk a little bit about consistency and static dynamic content, static versus dynamic content. In this particular case, we're talking about where the sidebars are placed. If you have the option in your theme to move the sidebars around, when I use this theme today, I'm going to have, in this particular site, I'm going to have them one on each side. In this particular site, I'm going to use the same theme, but I'm going to have them 2 side by side. Whatever you choose. What blocks do you put in these side columns to maintain a consistent look and feel? In this particular case up here across the top, let's pretend that big blue block is a node. We're reading a blog post. And on the side is a list that is relatively consistent in this section of the site. It's some type of menu-oriented list. It's always going to be there. It's navigation. Its purpose is navigation. Then we click on a blog link and we land on a blog that, in this particular case, it's from an author who has other blogs or other interesting articles, or has a tag on a subject that has other articles associated with it. And someone has created a block, a view saying, if the node that shows up has this tag, then show a list of other nodes with the same tag. So in our first one, the tag wasn't very popular. We only had one post, right? We go to the next blog, and suddenly it's on a topic that's very popular, and we have this dynamic list that's always updating every time we add something new. So we want to get squished. So, something to think about. Sometimes they're going to be wide, sometimes they're going to be narrow. We talked about that a little bit earlier. But on the side, on the right-hand side, in this particular case, it's when the person moves through the site, we have consistency. This stays stable, and then this will expand and contract as the content's available. Now, this isn't unique to Drupal. It's wireframing and planning 101, just making things consistent, but I wanted to bring this out. On the next one, the process is just an example of making it consistent. When you try to use the 2 columns on the side that are next to each other, sometimes it's easy to pull off, sometimes not so much. I went to a usability meetup, and we had a nice big discussion of when that should be allowed to happen and when not. And the usability people and UXers that are in the room, well, maybe it should be like this, but unless it's like that, and coloring background and so on. But I'll leave that to your artists to negotiate. But consistency, again, is key. My own personal strategy is that when I use a side-by-side, the fixed blocks navigation are always on the outer edge, and that the related content is closest to the main content area. So they become kind of a related package, if you will. And with the right coloring and the right theming, you can actually, it ends up kind of looking like a 2-column article or 2-column blog or so on. It's something, knowing that your theme then is going to be a 2-sidebar on this side. And unless all your pages are going to be like that, unless you use some kind of alternative where you can then change the layout. Alternative mean like panels or not composite, but panels. So you want to change the layout. You want to go side by side. Okay? Or you use another module and you have multiple themes. So like depending on, for this section of the site I want this theme, for this section of the site I want this theme, and so on and so forth. And each one of these themes has a different layout structure. So I can change the look and feel just by having different themes in my site. And there's 4 modules out there that allow you to do that based on different conditions. So does that make sense? Anyone have any experience trying to grapple with this? I mean, I go through it myself. It's like, what do I put here, and how do I manage that, and what's it going to look like? And every time I change the page, it's this is going to move, and and so on. But knowing that, and knowing how dynamic content generated by Drupal or any other content management system for that matter, if you don't have absolute control of exactly how big it is, what shape it is, and so on, you're going to have some movement in your blocks, and it's going to change the shape of your layout. And if you are trying to create a visual look and feel that's magazine perfect, which in some cases is valid, depending on what you're doing, you're going to need to keep that in mind. Questions? Okay, so that's basically what I wanted to share with you today, how themes manage your page layout, creating different layouts, options for overriding, and some strategies for block layouts. Now, I'd like to take some questions and give away a couple books. So, yes?
General questions around themes. So,
can you speak up a little?
just some general questions about themes themselves.
Okay.
So a lot of the work that we do, especially with the Wireframes page and stuff like that, we worry a lot about blocks. Do you know any themes that have actually been tested and scored with this practice?
He wants to know about 508 compliance and whether or not they've been tested and so on.
Wireframes, but it's kind of,
No.
It takes a lot of work to do.
It is. Yeah. Well, first off, what produces the 508 compliant code is not only it's not just in the theme. That's something, if you're not familiar with Drupal, is that theming code does not always reside in the theme. It resides in modules as well. Modules that are contributed, modules that are part core. The folks that have built Drupal for us made a large effort recently, especially in Drupal 7, to bring it Drupal 7's core activities up to being 508 compliant. That's what they say. I did some reading on that. You may install a module that produces, let's say, a block with a particular layout with some HTML or whatever that's not 508 compliant. You can either make the modifications and resubmit them to the project, saying, hey, great block, but can we tweak it? That's going to be something you're going to have to look at, where the theming code, or you can override it. Use your theme to override and do it, in a compliant manner. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. Yes?
When you're managing a project for a client, do you use the wireframes for your own purpose and to use with the builders, and then show them the theme based on the wireframes that you created, or do you show them the wireframes as well?
The wireframes for me are a planning tool with the client. When I work with the client, I get a feel for their business operations and what they're trying to accomplish with the site and the kind of content they're going to have. It's kind of a casual conversation, but in this book, all the things I do in my head are here. And then I sit down and say, okay, now I think I know what they're going for. Maybe we look at some sites that they're falling in love with. Oh, I want mine to look like that, but I like this over here. And I take a look at it and say, okay, based on what they want, what they like, I sometimes I take Post-it notes on a piece of paper or a whiteboard, depending on what we're doing, and we start sketching it out. And then once I have a general agreement of, yes, I love right-hand column stuff, or I want split, major architectural agreements for as far as layouts go, then I start wireframing and bring it back to them. Because clients, most of them, 99.9% of the time, are visual. Some clients can't even visualize the stick drawings, if you will, of the wireframes. They have to see the actual comp.
That's what I mostly
And
do, is that mine can't picture it unless there's content and a photo and colors and everything already in there.
And that's where you're going to have to, that's where you're going to have to negotiate your costs and your schedules with your client, because it's highly likely that they're not going to like the first thing that comes out. Now, there's an in-between strategy that's often helpful before you get into the comp area and get your artists working on those beautiful pictures and so on, and that is a style guide. So say, okay, before we start drawing, I know that you can't visualize the wireframe, but this is generally where we're going. So before we draw the pictures, what colors do you want or not want? Is there any branding? Are there logos? Are there, maybe their logo is orange, pink, and purple. So, okay, so what shading am I going to use for that? What font color am I going to use for that? And come with those agreements so that when you give them something, it's, the comp, the PS, the Photoshop file or whatever, it's closer. Yes?
For wireframing itself, what do you use as a tool? What do you try using? Do you use Mockingbird?
No, I haven't. There are several tools I've tried, and I'm coming in here, I'm like, what were they again? Because obviously I wasn't impressed. I'm going to try Balsamiq next. I've tried a couple, didn't like them, and I've often reverted to PowerPoint for quick things. It's like, okay, let me draw some squares and move them around because I didn't have any Post-its or something, and it was really fast, for me to do. And then I would go off and create a more sophisticated wireframe. I had one client who actually liked the PowerPoint because what she needed it for, and she didn't have any other tools. I can make it interactive, and there are tools that do that too, but I was just kind of having a conversation with her, and we just stuck with it. So I made the hyperlinks, little menu hyperlinks, and she took it to funders for her project, and she was able to click through it and play it like it was a website. We had some initial artwork, like branding and stuff, already available at the time, so I just backfilled some brown and beige and stuff that she wanted, and they got a feel for what the site was going to look like just from a simple PowerPoint, and they loved it and they funded her. So I don't necessarily recommend PowerPoint because you're not going to get your dimensions. You're not going to be able to tell your themer that this should be 220 pixels wide and this should be, you're going to miss a lot on that, okay? But if that's all you have available and they want to take the tool with them, and maybe play with it. I had another client, I gave them the PowerPoint. They moved things around because they had PowerPoint. They didn't have any other application, the drawing application. They were able to move things around very easily because they understood the application, and then I understood what they wanted, and then we started doing the dimensions. So, yeah.
Yeah, is there currently a best practice for screen size in terms of resolution or the size itself that people design to now, or is that sort of past that?
If you're designing for your regular computers and not your mobile devices, enter a world of, oh my God. 960 seems to be, the trend. That the question, I'm sorry, was, width. You didn't hear that? Yes.
I'm not a business. I hire everything for building a website.
Uh-huh.
So one of the issues I'm having in this Drupal learning clip, as one person referred to it, is how to match up when you're talking about layout and you're talking about themes and when you're talking about content language. So if I get how, okay, I want this block to be, which is about the structure, to be in this area, which is about the layout, but then that move over to where, what am I talking about when I start talking about themes?
The theme, if I can reword your question, okay. I think it's going to be about how does the theme make the layout? Is that okay? The theme has a series of template files, and in there are various div tags, if you will, defining HTML blocks, if you will. And in there is code. It's best to actually just open one up and look at it. I don't have one handy, sorry. Open it up and look at it. But it has your HTML, your basic HTML code that has variables, PHP little tidbits. It says print variable X, and X might be logo or content or links. And Drupal knows to go out and they knows what it's supposed to get and dumps it into that space. And your CSS is going to say, for this div, maybe this is div XYZ, it's going to say, float this over to the left, or float this to the right, or put a pink background on it, or make it,
So is the variable in the theme
Yes.
the same as what the name of your block?
Oh, no, you name your blocks. It's not, okay.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
if I name my block something, and I want my theme to put this name block here,
The block system handles that for you.
okay, that's what I
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Yes.
I wanted to follow up on that, on the actual tools people use for wireframes, basic PowerPoint. I know. That's why I'm a little-
Oh, okay. Balsamic is another one.
What was that,
Mockingbird is online, it's drag and drop, their server, stores on their server. It's collaborative, you can identify people that are able to access it. And what's really nice about it is when you position something aside from telling you the size, as you move it in relation to other items, lines will appear to show you that it's aligned vertically, horizontally, in the center. So it's pretty good.
Okay, so
You can send dynamic characteristics to the objects.
Well, it has dynamic canvas, it's smart objects.
so we can record this. The discussion is Mockingbird is the one that you use. It's an online tool, allows collaborative design. It's got some grids that appear to help you make things align. Balsamic is another one. If you Google wireframe tools, the list is huge. Uh-huh.
I never heard of
Mockingbird?
it. I use Inkscape,
Inkscape? Okay.
but I'm pretty sure that's
I've tried, I think it's ProtoShare. That has some pros and cons. So it just,
out of Google Chrome.
Google, Chrome Maps or something. It's just,
So the Chrome apps, you can find some Chrome apps.
It's free and it's fantastic because you can actually go to a website and just pull it up on browser.
Just straightforward Google Docs, not that bad.
sharing documents through Google Docs. Yeah. Definitely.
It's CACOO.
CACOO. Yeah. So CACAO or something like that. Yes, I have one of those accounts. I was gonna play around with that too. Yeah.
It's limited, but you're not spending $3,000 on Acture. So.
Yeah, Acture, that's another one that's expensive. But so it's just going to depend on what your people are going to need from you, what your clients are going to need from you, whether you're just doing it yourself and in your head, I know this is going to be 220 pixels, I'm just going to do some Post-it notes. A Post-it note exercise is, can be very helpful and good enough because you're using a theme that already exists and it doesn't matter if you wanted 225 width sidebar because it's coming as 230 because that's what the theme gives you and you're not going to change it. So look at your scenario, look at your situation, and then work with that. I wouldn't expend a lot of effort on something that's not going to make a difference because everyone has budgeted time, everyone has, budgets. Yeah.
How hard is it to modify a box theme to say, if you know basic CSS, can you just make one of your regions a little bit wider?
Oh, sure. You can override it. There's the whole concept that's kind of like hacking, if you will. Okay. So anytime you change something that's been contributed, the likelihood of you being able to upgrade your whatever it is you took, theme, module, whatever, you're going to lose your changes. So some themes automatically come with a directory for overrides, where anything that you want to do different, it gives you a file and you can put them all in there. So when you go to do an update, you can pull that out, drop in the new version, stick your updates back in, and everything's saved. So that's something you need to think about. Every time you make a change to something that you pulled from the community, think about where that change is going to reside and how you're going to manage that when you go to upgrade or, if you need to. So, but yeah, you can go in and do whatever you want, override, and that's overriding. In some cases where a block module makes it look pink and I want it to be blue, we'll override in the theme, as opposed to going out to the block module and changing it there. Hold on a second, let me check the time. Okay.
Have you done any wireframing when you're developing a regular Drupal web page and a mobile? Do you do them simultaneously? The web version and then...
Okay, the question is wireframing for regular computer screens versus mobile devices and doing them at the same time or not. Let me offer this to you. Yes, you can do that, but there's different ways that you can come to the mobile environment, as you know. You can come to the mobile web and be, laid out for the mobile web browser, if you will, being browser sensitive to our devices, right? Or you can use an app and bring your mobile web page in via an app, so it's always available. Someone clicks an app button. Or you can have separate apps that provide features that collect data that maybe send them someplace, maybe back to your site. So the first thing to understand is in a mobile device is what method are you going to be using to get your content to that mobile device, and then the nightmare of which mobile device are you going to build to, what size is it going to be, and then secondly, if your normal computer interface, for example, if you're going to have a flash device, running around, then you're going to be wanting to rethink your layouts because, in this world, I understand still doesn't support Flash, the I world. So I don't even know if Android does, to be honest with you. But it's going to change the scope, and then we're going to have to think, well, not everything can be seen conveniently. So what message, what purpose does the I version, the mobile version of my website serve? Everything on my site is going to be, they're not going to care about it except for this one page that has a shopping list. And they're going to want to know that when they're out and about. They're not going to want to know my about. They're not going to want to know my history, things like that. So I'm going to build a mobile interface, maybe via an app that only pulls content from that one part of my site. So it's a rethinking of the purpose of your website in a traditional environment and the purpose of your mobile environment. And that's what's going to drive it. You can do it at the same time, but it can be overwhelming. Phased approach, agile, keep it simple, moving forward is love. And a lot of times, we're at DrupalCon Chicago, it's like think mobile first, then, yeah. Okay, 2 more questions, and then I'm going to give away some books.
I was just going to say that whenever we do any mobile stuff or web stuff, we have a ton of content, but we start with mobile first because the mobile kind of simplifies your world. You have a lot less stuff, and then you can add all the additional content afterwards.
Can I ask the name of your book?
Oh, it's The Guide to Planning and Building Websites. Drupal, The Guide to Building Websites. Did you have one question?
Oh, I was going to say I just looked up the Google Chrome one, and it's called Mockup Tiger.
Mockup Tiger for Google Chrome. Google Chrome.
Article
Is it what?
It has 50 tools for doing wireframes.
And where is that? What site is that on? 50 tools for doing wireframes.
That one was 50 free UI and web design wireframing kits, resources, and blah, blah, blah on Smashing Magazine.
Smashing Magazine. Okay, so it's 50 tools. You can probably Google that and find it. Do your own evaluation. Pardon?
I'm about to post it on Twitter. I found it.
Okay, make sure you pound the campsite thing. Okay.
And then the Google Chrome one was really Mockup Tiger.
Mockup Tiger, Google Chrome. Okay. All right, so I was going to just draw a number, guess a number or whatever. I don't know. I know. You all had really great questions. I was waiting for that really, oh my God question. And it's like, they're all really good, and I only have 2 books. 1 to 100. I've got 2 numbers in my head. Whoever wants a book, raise your hand and give me a number. And okay, all right. Okay, so
42.
75.
there's the first one. I have one number left.
17.
Who said 36? It was 35. I didn't hear a 35, and 36 was the closest to all the 30s that were being said. You said 35? Sneaky. All right. Thank you for your time, and I hope you got something out of it. And I'm around today. Stop me in the hall if you have any other questions. The book covers what we cover in the presentation and then some. I'm giving away another one. Just drop your card in the little black box out there at Media Currents table. Maybe you'll win.